Hello, my name is Kendra Park. I'm a junior at Bloomsburg University. I dual major in mass communications and political science. And today our presentation will be about UNICEF and their global disaster relief efforts. I chose UNICEF because in high school, during a volunteer program that I was in, we did work for UNICEF. It was called Trick or Treat for UNICEF. You know, you'd go around with little boxes, and instead of getting candy door to door, you'd ask for money door to door. So I just knew it was a very good organization, and I decided to focus on global disaster relief just because of, current events down in Houston, and then in the Caribbeans. So, for this presentation, this is the outline. I'm going to go over about UNICEF, what UNICEF does, UNICEF's mission, UNICEF's history, past UNICEF disaster relief involvement, current UNICEF disaster relief, and then I have a works cited at the end. So about UNICEF. For 70 years, UNICEF has worked to improve the lives of children and their families. Despite significant challenges around the world, UNICEF workers fight for the rights of all children in search of safe shelter, proper nutrition, protection from disaster and conflicts, and equality. UNICEF works with the United Nations and other United Nations agencies to make sure that children are on the global agenda. UNICEF creates a balance using thorough research and practical solutions for children. So, what UNICEF does. Like I said before, for 70 years across 190 countries and territories, UNICEF protects the rights of every child. So how do they do this? Well, they have child protection and inclusion. UNICEF works to improve the policies and services that protect all children. They aim to make the world a safe and inclusive place for children to grow in. Then child survival. Child mortality has decreased globally. UNICEF works to make sure solutions reach all children around the globe. Then education. UNICEF believes that quality education is a right for all children, whether in the developing world or among conflict and crisis. UNICEF in emergencies. Wherever there is a crisis, UNICEF strives to reach children and families in the hardest hit regions with life-saving resources. Then gender. UNICEF fights for the equal rights of women and girls, with their full involvement in political, social, and economic development around the world. Innovation for children. UNICEF believes that the complex challenges children face can be met with innovative, creative solutions backed by laborious research. Supply and logistics. UNICEF works to provide and transport critical medicine, aid, and supplies to the world's most disadvantaged children. Research and analysis. UNICEF's global programs and enterprises are grounded in rigorous research and thorough analysis. So UNICEF's mission statement. UNICEF is authorized by the United Nations General Assembly to advocate for the defense of children's rights, to help meet their basic needs and expand their opportunities to reach their full potential. UNICEF is conducted by the Convention on the Rights of the Child and strives to establish children's rights as enduring ethical principles and international standards of behavior towards children. UNICEF insists that the survival, protection, and development of children are universal deployment imperatives that are essential to human progress. UNICEF mobilizes political will and material resources to help countries, particularly developing countries, ensure a first call for children and to build their capacity to form appropriate policies and deliver services for children and their families. UNICEF is committed to ensuring special protection for the most disadvantaged children, such as victims of war, disasters, extreme poverty, all forms of violence and exploitation, and those with disabilities. UNICEF responds in emergencies to protect the rights of the child. UNICEF is nonpartisan and its cooperation is free of discrimination. UNICEF aims through its country programs to promote the equal rights of women and girls, to support their full involvement in the political, social, and economic development of their countries. UNICEF works with all its partners towards the achievement of the Sustainable Human Development Goals adopted by the world community and the realization of the vision of peace and social progress preserved in the Charter of the United Nations. So, UNICEF's history. It began in 1946. The International Children's Emergency Fund is what it was originally called. It was created to help children affected by World War II. UNICEF is for child health purposes generally, and aid is to be distributed to all children without discrimination. Then in 1953, UNICEF becomes a permanent United Nations agency. UNICEF's projects in water, sanitation, and hygiene seek to reduce preventable childhood diseases and death. Campaigns to eliminate yaws and leprosy are highly effective. Then in 1957, UNICEF begins new nutrition programs. Communities are trained in vegetable gardening, fish pond management, poultry and livestock breeding, and nutrition education. In 1959, the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of the Child defines children's rights to protection, education, healthcare, shelter, and good nutrition. In 1961, new aid for education programs is put in place as UNICEF expands its work to address the needs of the whole child. In 1968, UNICEF provides aid for mothers and children in civil conflicts in Nigeria and Vietnam, upholding its philosophy of non-political and non-discriminatory aid. In 1979, due to its non-political status, UNICEF is able to lead the United Nations and Red Cross in major relief and rehabilitation operations across Cambodia, now Cambodia. In 1985, a ceasefire during a civil war in El Salvador allows for 3 days of mass immunizations of children. The practice of children as a zone of peace was later applied in Lebanon in 1987, Sudan in 1989, Iraq in 1991, and other conflict zones into the 90s. 1989, 159 United Nations member states adopt the Convention on the Rights of the Child. In 1994, UNICEF and UNESCO invent and distribute School in a Box, a global effort to support uninterrupted education for children in humanitarian crises. Then in 1995, at the 4th World Conference on Women, held in Beijing, China, world leaders renew their commitment to the rights of women and girls. In 1999, UNICEF, the World Health Organization, and the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs intervene to administer vaccines and other urgent health services for children in conflict. In 2012, UNICEF hosts the first forum of the Global Partnership on Children with Disabilities. In 2014, the first version of RapidPro, an open-source platform for sharing real-time data across health, education, and youth engagement platforms, is launched. And in 2015, mobile technology makes the distribution of medicine and supplies faster and more accurate, which becomes essentially important during the Ebola crisis in West Africa. So, past UNICEF disaster relief involvement. In 2004, UNICEF and partners organized a rapid humanitarian response to the tsunami in the Indian Ocean. And in 2010, a magnitude 7 earthquake killed nearly 160,000 people and displaced more than 1 million people from their homes in Haiti. UNICEF led the international response on behalf of children. And then pictured below, I have some examples from these past disaster relief involvements. So then, current UNICEF disaster relief, which today would be the Caribbean hurricanes. UNICEF deployed workers to support joint needs and damage assessments across hurricane-affected islands. To date, in the Eastern Caribbean, UNICEF distributed pre-positioned supplies, like tents, family hygiene kits, recreational equipment, school and ECD kits, and is coordinating the movement of additional supplies with SEDMA. UNICEF Cuba quickly worked to provide wash supplies, psychosocial support, hygiene, messaging, and the rehabilitation of schools. UNICEF Haiti and partners supported multi-sectoral assessments and provision of emergency supplies to those affected in the north, with an emphasis on safe water. There is ongoing surveillance and rapid response to cholera alerts, which have been increased in response to the hurricanes to prevent the outbreak of waterborne diseases. Pre-positioned plumpy nut products have been distributed to provide supplementary nutrition to affected children. The distribution of school kits is underway for children in the most affected schools of the Northwest. And here I just included a map of the areas that were affected by the hurricanes. So in 2017, UNICEF and partners plan for 500,000 people to regain access to safe water and hygiene supplies and services and sanitation, 51,500 children to have access to psychosocial support in schools, community centers, and temporary shelters, and 37,500 preschool-aged children to have access to safe learning spaces, equipment with social, and safe learning spaces equipped with educational materials. So, along with all the work that UNICEF does, they also need funding for these efforts. So, funding requirements. UNICEF immediately requires $19.7 million to meet the humanitarian needs of children and at-risk families affected by these Caribbean hurricanes. The funds will help support the health and well-being of affected children and adolescents and help restore a sense of morality in their lives. So in this chart, there's a breakdown of where the money would be going. Eastern Caribbean, Cuba, Haiti, and the regional office. And then what section the money would be going towards, like education, child protection, water sanitation, hygiene, and then cross-cutting or coordination. So, this is my works cited. UNICEF obviously has the most information on UNICEF, so that's what I used. So from this PowerPoint, you can gather that UNICEF is definitely part of global governance because it puts all politics aside and just focuses in on the children. They just want what's best for the children. Doesn't matter what language they speak, what religion they follow, where they live. They will be there to help them with whatever needs that they have. And global disaster is just an example of one of those areas that they help in.